and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 501, and today's date is October 24th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Dollar Losing Reserve Currency Status, Central Bankers Preparing a Major Conflict. And basically what is going on here today is there is complete chaos. We've had the Ottawa shooting up in Canada, and of course they're trying to use this to show that there's terrorism coming to Canada, and of course they're passing all different types of laws there because of this incident. We also see there's a New York person who is a doctor down in West Africa who came up to the United States, went through the screening and has Ebola and decided to go bowling, take the subway and everything else. And we also see in Washington State there was a shooting in a high school today, and it seems like, as always the case, the shooter shot himself and he is now dead, and it looks like other people are injured or have been killed in that area. We also see there was a hatchet man in New York City where he was attacking police officers, and of course just yesterday we reported that police need to be on alert because they heard chatter of attacks on law enforcement officials, and we see it all of a sudden just happen. Now all of this is being done because there's going to be more and more chaos as time goes on, because as we can see, the economy is collapsing. The central bankers realize that this whole thing is falling apart, and what they're trying to do is create as much chaos as possible, because eventually what they're going to do is have this major false flag event to bring us into war. And we see that the major government officials of countries that are not part of the private Western central banking system, they see this coming, because Putin was out there today talking about this, saying yes, major conflicts are on their way, and really we know where this is all coming from, because the central bankers are becoming desperate. They don't know what else to do, so they need to cover up what is coming. So what they do is they create events, they get us into war, and they pretend that everything is fine, and it's because we're in war, that's why everything is collapsing. Let's get into the economic collapse news here. And we understand that Europe is falling apart, and it is a domino effect, and it's starting to affect other countries. We see United Kingdom right now. Their economic growth falls to 0.7%. Official figures show that the UK economy slowed in the 3 months to the end of September, as manufacturing grew at the slowest pace for 18 months. The Office for National Statistics said Friday that UK's gross domestic product increased only by 0.7% in the third quarter. And this is lower because it was at 0.9%, so that is dropping. France is out there, and they're saying their unemployment has hit new record highs right now. And of course, the people are saying no more austerity. And of course, we know what the EU is trying to do right now. They're trying to place new austerity controls, which is not allowing income and wages to grow. And this is going to cause more and more major problems in these countries. The whole thing's falling apart. It's collapsing right in front of our eyes, and the central bankers have no way of fixing this whatsoever, because the debt level cannot be sustained, and the only way they know how to fix it is to continually pile on more and more debt to these countries. And eventually what's going to happen, of course, as we know, is they're going to have to create this event, because they need all eyes off of it, and they're doing everything they possibly can. But companies are starting to realize that there are major problems going on, and it has nothing to do with the weather, because we've been out of that winter months for such a long time right now, and the economy, their sales is completely dropping. McDonald's, as we know, global revenues fell 5% and net income plunged 30%. Coca-Cola, international volume was up a measly 1%, but in the U.S., volume declined by 1%. Revenues at the third largest beer giant, Heineken, which brews its stuff in 70 countries, dropped by 1.7%. Unilever warned of a slowdown in the emerging markets in Europe and stagnation in the U.S. Like other consumer product companies, it complained about currency issues, political unrest, and the bleak economy. We know things are not going well. Companies are starting to realize this, that, wait a minute, you're telling us unemployment is down, it's at 5.9%. Where are our sales? It makes no sense. There's a disconnect right now. there is no bad weather at this point in time, so where are the people? Well, guess what? These people, they don't have the full-time paying jobs. Yes, it might look like it's at 5.9% because, of course, that's manipulated to make us believe that everything is fine, but most of these people are unemployed or underemployed or fell off the unemployment track, and this is where they're getting this number. And of course, it's starting to show up in retail and in sales because the real economic indicators do not match the illusionary numbers at this point. And what the CEO, Paul Pullman, said, we expect markets to remain tough. Unilever would cut expenses here and there, and they might have to lay off some people, about 1,400. And then what they're going to do is, of course, as every other company does, it cuts all their costs by removing people from their jobs. They shrink their products. They use other type of ingredients in their products, and we can see this is exactly what is happening to all these major companies. And of course, they're trying to make it look like there's absolutely no inflation. But again, this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. Now, what's very interesting is they're trying to convince us that new home sales is doing much, much better. It's increasing, but all they're doing is they're playing around with the numbers. Having exploded 18% higher in August, September's new home sales printed at 467,000 against their expectations of 470,000, and August surge to 504,000 was now revised lower to just 466,000. So they're saying that the new home sales inched up. No, they didn't. They're completely manipulating the numbers, and this is what they always do. They always go back, bring that number much lower, and show that things are improving. But again, the revised numbers are 7.5% lower than what they were. It makes no sense what's going on here, and this is what they do every single time. They go back, they manipulate the numbers, they bring it down lower to make it look like new home sales are increasing, but they're not. The median new home sales prices fell by 4%, and we've been seeing this in the market. When we look around, I'm using Zillow, Realtor.com, or Trulia, and you go into certain neighborhoods and you look around, you can see people have their houses on the market 60, 90, 120 days. They're lowering the prices, and we're seeing proof of this now because prices are coming down. Kay Schiller has said the real estate market is decelerating right now. It is not getting better. Prices are coming down, and of course, as we know, all the numbers they're throwing at us are completely fake, phony, and false. They're trying to make us believe that everything is fine. If this is true, why are there thousands upon thousands of people being laid off from the mortgage departments? The U.S. people here do not have the credit, the income, the jobs to go out and pay for mortgages. That's why you see most of the homes being purchased in cash. And it's not even the single-family homes anymore. They're purchasing condos and apartment buildings like this because they know they have to rent them out. They're paying in cash. They're trying to drive up the market. Fannie, Freddie Mac, giving 3% loans. There are builders that are chipping in saying, listen, we'll give the other 3%, we'll give you 100% financing. They're trying to prop the system up any way they possibly can. Now, we understand that China has launched their World Bank, and they're going to capitalize it first with $50 billion, then they're going to add another $50 billion to make it a total of $100 billion. India is the only major world economy to join the initiative and will be the second largest shareholder of the bank after China. Among other countries that are joining this are Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Nepal, Oman, Kuwait, Qatar, and all the countries of the Association of Southeast Asia. Now, there are certain countries that are not going to be involved in this, like Australia. They have been putting, United States has put pressure on Australia not to be involved. Indonesia is not going to be involved. South Korea is not going to be involved. And the United States is not going to be involved. The United States says it has concerns about the new rival to Western-dominated multilateral lenders. Japan is not going to be involved in this whatsoever, and we can see that they're very concerned about this, and this goes live in January. And this is why we see that umbrella revolution going on in China. They're trying to stop this whole entire thing before this thing goes live, and they're doing everything they possibly can to stop it. Now, in Washington, D.C., we understand that there is a new concealed carry gun law, but there seems to be a backdoor type of gun control thing going on in the District of Columbia, because basically, according to the new requirements, gun owners seeking permits must complete 18 hours of firearms training. Now that seems reasonable that they're going to go and get trained, but guess what? There are no instructors that have been approved to teach these courses. So these people who are applying for this, they cannot get the concealed license because there are no instructors. So it seems a little strange that they didn't have any of this in place, and there are no instructors that they can use to train these people. And I'm sure there's plenty of instructors out there. And of course, the District of Columbia wants to certify them, and there is none certified at this time. Now, we understand there was an event that happened in the Marysville Pilchuck High School, and this is in Washington State, and it looks like there was a shooter, and his name now was released, and his name is Jalen Freiberg. He was a ninth grader at the school, and it looks like he came in with a pistol, started firing, and then shot himself. And it seems like this is the same MO that has been happening in every one of these shootings. And of course, we have to look a little bit deeper. Was he on some type of SSRI type of drug, and what was really going on there? Because it seems very odd that a student would just come in and start shooting. There's always a backstory of what was really going on. And of course, the news, the government, they're all going to use this for gun control. But what's very interesting about this is that in the site legitgov.org, there's a screenshot that says during October 23rd, there is going to be a SWAT team drill. And they have a screenshot of the search in Google, and this is what it says: October 23rd, 2014, law enforcement under the direction of Marysville Police Department will be holding a SWAT training in the large fenced parking lot. And then when you come to look later on, that is completely gone. And as we know, many of these false flag events occur during training of the same type of incident. So we're going to have to look into this a little bit further and see what actually went on. Also, during this day, we realized that it was a half day for the children, and they were going to be dismissed at 12:15 p.m. Their time in Pacific time. And we can see that this happened early in the morning around 10:30, and of course the kids were I guess in lunch at that period, having lunch very, very early since it was a half day. Now, in New York, we see that a New York doctor who was in West Africa flew back up here, went through enhanced screening, and said he was Ebola-free, and he was allowed to pretty much walk around the city, go bowling, go on the subway, and then it turns out that he had temperature, and now he's saying he has Ebola. Now, listen, the CDC and all the medical professionals here in the United States have been dealing with Ebola, especially the CDC, in West Africa for over a year. We've had cases in Dallas. There's been a huge outcry of better protocols, and you're trying to tell me a doctor who was in the area of the outbreak was allowed to come in, went through enhanced screening, and they couldn't figure out if he had Ebola? And I can't believe they didn't detain him just for a certain period of time to quarantine him to make sure, because as we know, as we reported before, the test can show negative results even though you have Ebola, and keeping the person there for a couple days just to make sure and doing tests repeatedly might have shown that, yes, you do have Ebola. But again, it seems very strange the way all the medical professionals are operating, and things really aren't making sense. Now, it seems that Mali is becoming the sixth West African nation to get Ebola. Mali's health minister says the West African country has confirmed its first case of Ebola. The patient was a 2-year-old girl who had come from neighboring Guinea. Very interesting. The child was brought to the hospital in the Malayan town of Kays on Wednesday, and her blood sample tested positive for the virus. Now, of course, they can screen her, find out that she does have Ebola, but the doctor in New York, they had an enhanced screening, and they can't figure it out. But what's very interesting about Mali, and like I said, wherever Ebola is in West Africa, this is the places where the United States and all the private Western Central Bank countries would love to get into. And it seems that the French government, as we know, already has soldiers in Mali. There's 2,500 troops to support Malian government soldiers in the conflict against the Islamic rebels there. And of course, French went into Mali as soon as Germany asked for its gold back. Very interesting. And France has already deployed around 750 troops to Mali at this point. France is supported by other NATO members. U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta confirmed that the U.S. providing intelligence to French forces in Mali. Canada, Belgium, Denmark, Germany have also publicly backed the French incursion, pledging logistical support in the crackdown of these rebels. Now, of course, as we know, Mali is the third largest gold producer with large-scale exploration going on. Mali currently has 7 operating gold mines. Uranium is they thought to have about 5,000 tons worth. They're huge deposits of lithium. There's about 4 million tons in Mali, and Mali's petroleum potential already attracting significant interest from investors. And what's even more interesting about Mali is that China just signed a string of agreements totaling $11 billion, most of it intended to finance 2 major railways projects linking the landlocked country to the coast. The $11 billion includes $51 million in gifts and interest-free loans from China announced by the government on Friday. So what we're seeing here is that China again is in Mali. Wherever China and Russia are making deals, we see the United States, France, and all the other private Western central banks in these countries going after terrorists, going after these countries with war. It's the same MO time and time again. Now, what's very interesting in Sierra Leone, a government official in Sierra Leone says that some people are recovering from Ebola because of a new treatment there. The Minister of Information, Alpha Kanu, recently wrote in a letter that this works, people are getting better, but efforts to get this information and the treatment itself to the people have met with great opposition on the part of the United States FDA and others. At this point, every option to treat Ebola, both pharmaceutical and natural, remains experimental. So why is this one option being met with so much resistance? According to a statement by NSF Medical Director Dr. Rima Labu, a shipment of the product was shipped to Sierra Leone on August 20th. And what was this product? It was none other than nano silver. Very odd, and they've been using this in Sierra Leone. But what's very interesting about this is that the product was shipped on August 20th, and it didn't arrive until September 28th, 5 weeks later, while the disease spread and people suffered and died unnecessarily because international forces opposed the simple clinical demonstration of the nutrient. The shipment follows a statement made by the World Health Organization on August 12th, reported by Mashable, that acknowledges that there is not yet a proven treatment, but even unproven options should be made available to people afflicted with Ebola. And it's very odd, once again, that this is being covered up because, as we know, the pharmaceutical companies only want everyone to purchase their product, and nano silver cannot be patented, and this is why they are trying to step to the side of this and not use it, not even look at it. And I do have a document on the X22Report.com site. If you go to resources, you can see there is a document out there that they've used this on hemorrhagic fever, and it showed good results on this. Now, in Ukraine, it seems that Merkel is out there, and they're saying there's absolutely no reason to revise sanctions against Russia or to lift sanctions at this time. Merkel said that the EU leaders do not see any possibility to discuss lifting sanctions at this time, as no sufficient measures are being taken to fulfill the Minsk agreements on the resolution of the crisis in eastern Ukraine. Now, of course, as we know, they're not going to lift the sanctions because they're getting ready to have this major false flag event occur. As we know, the United States was out there telling every U.S. citizen to not go into this region where Ukraine borders Russia because things could get out of hand and something might happen. But we can see already Yatzenyuk, the Ukrainian prime minister, is out there, and he's warning that Russia and its proxy forces in eastern Ukraine could seek to destabilize the country's parliamentary elections on Sunday with attacks. So they're already prepping this and letting you know, yes, we're going to create a false flag event to get this war started, and it seems like we're heading down that road. Now, of course, in Ukraine, most of the people are not joining in on the elections. What's happening there is about 3 million people in southeastern Ukraine will not take part in the elections. Of course, I remember the United States government central bankers in Syria saying, well, most of the people, because there's a civil war going on, they're not going to be able to vote, so this is not a fair election. But in Ukraine, the same thing's happening, but this election's okay because they have the puppet government in power and everything is fine. Who cares if these 3 million people don't vote? It doesn't really matter because we already have the person in place, and it really doesn't matter what people vote because it's not going to count anyhow. Now, it looks like in Yemen, as we know, there are things out of control there. The tribes of Yemen are rising up, trying to push out the puppet government. The same thing's happening in Libya, the same thing's happening in Lebanon, and the same thing's happening in Iraq. But right now, the tribesmen, they are going to blow up the main oil export pipeline Friday, and they're halting crude flows, and it looks like everything is coming to a screeching halt, and this is going to piss the central bankers off. And of course, what they're trying to do is they're trying to recapture the entire country and kick these puppet governments out of their country and take control, and then eventually repair the oil pipelines and then try to sell this not using the dollar. And this is when big problems start to happen because the central bankers are not going to let this happen. Now, it looks like the puppet government in Libya, who's pretty much out of Libya right now, just holding on barely to whatever they have left, they're telling the citizens in Libya to start a civil disobedience campaign in Tripoli and cause riots, wreak havoc until they can get troops into the area. And of course, who are those troops? Well, we understand that the French, the United States, are preparing and setting up a base right outside Libya, and we can see something is definitely being prepared for them to move into the region. Now, what's very interesting is that Iran and Russia are going to join forces to fight the Islamic State. Now, this is going to cause a major, major problem because, as we know, the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States, UK, Israel, and other Arab nations, and they are funding them. And now Iran and Russia are going to join in. Remember, the United States did not want Iran, Syria, Russia, China involved in this whatsoever. The governments of Iran, Russia have announced a joint effort to enhance their military operations against the Islamic State. Militaries from both countries will be working with Iraq commanders. Over 60 military experts from Russia and Iran created a joint operations headquarters in the Al Rashid Hotel in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. So we're going to have to see how this plays out and how the United States government central bankers take this on and what their response will be. And France is out there, the president of France, he is out there saying that operations will be stepped up against the Islamic State in Iraq, which must be struck hard. The pace of our actions is going to speed up now, and we can see that things are ramping up. They're getting ready. We have to remember the United States has pretty much kicked out the Iraqi forces. They're taking over an air base. They're setting up a division headquarters that can support between 10 and 30,000 soldiers. There are reports that 13,000 soldiers are on their way, and we also understand that they're maneuvering to bring in special forces into Syria. Meanwhile, what's happening? The United States is continually destroying the infrastructure of Syria. Now, what's very interesting is that in the town of Kobani, as we know, the United States dropped these weapons, and I see that one of the listeners, Derek, sent me pictures of these weapons, and it looks like a lot of the weapons are old or they do not work whatsoever, and they're pretty much non-workable. And this is, when you look at the pictures from this is exactly what it looks like. And what we're seeing right now is they're setting everything up. Now, of course, we understand they were dropping weapons to help those people, the Kurds in Kobani. But what's happening is that they're going to bring in the Free Syrian Army, about 1,300 fighters, and they're going to help the Kurds defend this area after the Islamic State took over much of that area. So let's think about this for a second. They're going to bring in the Free Syrian Army to join up with the Kurds to defend this area. So basically, the Free Syrian Army has captured Kobani. But what's interesting about this is that the Syrian Kurdish fighters in northern town of Kobani have denied any agreement with Turkey to allow this to happen. So we can see there's maneuvering going on right now, and they're trying to push the Free Syrian Army to defend certain areas. And like I said yesterday, the U.S. officials are trying to convince us that they're only training them to defend these areas. Once the Islamic State has moved in, wreaked havoc, the Free Syrian Army will fill in later on once the bombing occurs and the Islamic State just happens to scuttle away and leave this wide open for the Free Syrian Army. Now, it looks like the U.S. officials are planning to bomb oil pipelines in Syria. And this seems like it's a viable option. A top State Department official on Thursday said the bombing oil pipelines controlled by the Islamic State in Syria is now a viable option under the consideration by the U.S. military. Now, of course, bombing oil pipelines to get the Islamic State financing would be very foolhardy, because most of this is not controlled by the Islamic State. First of all, it would be almost impossible to determine that the pipelines were carrying oil produced by oil fields under the Islamic State control. And second, there could be a considerable risk of civilian casualties from the resulting explosions. Bombing pipelines could also lead to massive oil spills and resulting in environmental damage. Now, of course, the United States doesn't care about this. They don't care about killing civilians, as we've seen from their mandate. And again, it's not about hitting the Islamic State. It's about destroying the infrastructure of Syria and destroying all their pipelines to all the different areas inside Syria. And you can see this is exactly what they're doing. Now, there is a report that the Islamic State is using chemical weapons in Iraq, chlorine weapons. And of course, where is the United States saying they've crossed the red line? Where are they? Pretty much nowhere, as usual. They're concerned about it, but this is part of the proxy army, because as we know, the Free Syrian Army was using chemical weapons, as was shown back in August of 2013. Then they used chlorine weapons, and they try to pin it on Assad. And of course, the Islamic State, which is part of the entire Free Syrian Army type of structure, of course they're going to use chlorine weapons, because it's all part of the same exact system. And they're doing everything they possibly can to wreak havoc in the area, and they don't care what they use to do it and who they hurt. Now, as we know, the Ottawa shooting was created for many specific reasons. Of course, they used it to increase the terror alert, to pass legislation, to bring in biometric technologies and combine them with the United States. And we see that there's information coming out that the Ottawa shooter, Michael, his father, was in the Libyan rebel forces that overthrew Gaddafi. And we can see they're making the link to Libya right now. And of course, this person was most likely a CIA or Canadian type of asset to fight in the Libyan war to overthrow Gaddafi. But what's more interesting about this shooter is that it seems like he had a drug problem, and he was mentally unstable, and it's starting to look like this had nothing to do with terrorism whatsoever. It looks like they just used this for their agenda. And it seems like this person, Michael, decided to rob a McDonald's with a stick because he wanted to go to jail to try to kick his cocaine habit. He was arrested, and court workers concluded that he may have an undiagnosed mental health disorder in addition to being addicted to crack and cocaine. It was all part of a bizarre plan by the man who attacked the Parliament building. He was hoping to attack the building, get caught, and then go to jail. And they have audio recordings to show that, yes, this was his plan. So it's starting to look like this wasn't really a terrorist attack whatsoever. Maybe someone got near him, convinced him what to do. You would go to jail. We see this a lot. He could have been a dupe of the Canadian forces where he was meant to do this. And now there's reports coming from the CBC, reported last night, that in weeks leading up to the two so-called terror incidents that took place in the week in Quebec and Ottawa, Canadian authorities had been running war games exercises that depicted such attacks. Within the last month, we know that the CSIS, the RCMP, and the National Security Task Force ran scenarios that's akin to a war game exercise, if you will, where they actually imagine literally an attack in Quebec, followed by an attack in another city, followed by a tip that hey, some foreign fighters are coming back from Syria, and this all took place. So they had something that mimicked this completely. Now, is this an amazing coincidence that the Canadian intelligence ran a drill envisioning an attack first in Quebec, then another city? I don't think so. There are no coincidences. And we can see by this man that it seems like he was set up. He wanted to go to jail. He had a drug problem. It seemed like he had other mental problems. And it's starting to seem that this was completely set up. Now, yes, they reported about law enforcement officials need to be on the lookout for attacks from the Islamic State, and all of a sudden we had an axe-wielding man in New York City who just ran up to 4 policemen, started using an axe and chopping at them, and of course this man was shot dead. Now it's turning out that this man had pretty much no ties to the Islamic State whatsoever, even though they were trying to make it look like that yes, he did, with his Facebook and everything like that. Now, yesterday I reported that the FBI was warning that the Islamic State is getting ready to kidnap journalists. Now, I was thinking about this the other day. Why would they put this warning up? Now, they might want to keep journalists out of Iraq and Syria. And I'm not talking about the Islamic State. I'm talking about the U.S. government central bankers, because they're planning on something very, very big to happen in this area. And they don't want journalists reporting on it. They don't want the reporters around that area. So they're using this scare tactic to keep everyone away so they don't report on anything that's going on. And this is not just with the United States, but this is all around the world who have reporters. And it seems like this might be something where this is leading up to some type of false flag event, and we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully. Now, Putin was out there, and he is saying that the U.S. dollar is losing trust as a reserve currency, and the other countries are looking at this and saying that, you know what, the dollar is dying, and we know it is. Putin also said the world without rules is possibility, anarchy growing, adding that the risk of major conflicts involving major countries is growing, as well as the risk of arms control treaties being violated. Putin exclaimed that the U.S.-led unipolar world is like a dictatorship over other countries, and that the U.S. leadership brings no good for others and calls for a new global consensus. He's saying that there is a major conflict on its way, and we know exactly what that is, and we understand that Putin and the president of China and the other nations realize what the central bankers are doing. They're trying to provoke war, and he's calling them on it right now, saying, yes, we know exactly what you're doing. We understand the dollar is dying, and you're trying to provoke all of us into going war, and you're going to do something which is going to be very, very major to bring all of these countries into war, and it has to be stopped now before it goes any further. And this is what he's trying to tell the world, and this is what he's trying to tell everyone right now. And we all understand this, that to cover this up, the United States government central bankers will revert to horrific methods of covering everything up, and they don't care who they hurt, what damage they have to cause. Even if they have to get into World War III and start a nuclear war, it doesn't matter to them. They believe they can go into their bunkers and when it's all over, come out and restart the entire system once again. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.